Welcome to MVSU News on WVSD TV.
I pinch myself sometimes when I hear the introduction. I think I'm gonna cut it down a little bit because that's a whole lot. But it's amazing that on my journey, I've been able to do so much. If you had told me, when I was, Mama, 5 or 6, a little girl playing teacher because I wanted to be a teacher when I was younger, that I would be in this position, able to do the things that I'm able to do now, I would not have believed you. I grew up not even in a small town, 7 miles outside of a small town, Carthage, Mississippi, on the banks of the Pearl River on a cattle and timber farm. Okay, just imagine. We had dirt roads when I was younger. I was born in Greenville, Mississippi, right up the road. My mom is from Anguilla, and so I spent the first year of my life here in the Mississippi Delta. And I have a sidebar. A lot of my friends and family are Mississippi Valley graduates, so you'll be happy to know that. My Pastor Miles Jr. is a Valley graduate, and he reminds us of that every time I go home to church. So I do have a bond with Mississippi Valley and really with all HBCUs. To go further in terms of my story. So went through high school, was in the band, very active, cheerleader, did all those things, very active in the Student Government Association, and was always interested in helping people, in teaching, still not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. Fast forward, get to high school, time for graduation. Top 5 in the class of 72, and at that time for Carthage High School, that was a huge class. That was the largest class, and I'm sure some of you all can relate. Anybody from Mississippi can relate to how small some of our high schools are. So it came time to make a decision of where to go to college. I was Howard bound. There was no other, it was the ultimate in HBCUs. So I sent all my information in. I threw in Alcorn and Jackson State on the SAT form. I was like, okay, that'll be my backup. So they send back information and it shows like $36,000 for a year. Okay, I'm like, so I should talk to mom and dad. That's really not gonna work because they don't want me to be in debt while I'm in school and after I get out of school. So then I get 2 packages, one from Jackson State, one from Alcorn. And so Daddy had the conversation, we laid it all out on the table, said, okay, these are your choices. Full room, board, tuition, everything paid. I was like, but I want to go to Howard. And USM was kind of my other backup. He was like, no, you go into an HBCU, because I know that's where you will get the best education. You can choose between these 2. And so I looked at Mama, who is an Alcornite. I said, sorry, Mama, I can't leave the woods and go to the woods. I got to go to Jackson State. So that was the joke in the house. So I ended up at Jackson State, did really well, changed my major 4 times. Started out as an art major, criminal justice major, political science. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I'd say this so that you all understand it's very important to take the time to figure out what you really are passionate about and what you want to do. At the time, I didn't even really know what that was. But I knew I had a propensity toward policy. I love Black studies, I love history. So I ended up going to a seminar similar to this one and heard a professor talk about what urban studies had to offer, what urban affairs had to offer. A little bit of everything that I liked. And so that's the major that I chose, and it has served me well. Made great grades, was able to get all kinds of internships. I went to NASA, stints down on the Gulf Coast for a summer. Interned at every level of government, from the city of Jackson to the state of Mississippi, and did some federal internship work as well. Fast forward, finished that degree, didn't really know what I wanted to do, applied for some jobs locally, didn't get not one Didn't even get a letter back. Applied for 25 different positions in the city of Jackson and, outlying areas in the metro area. So I said, Lord, well, what does this mean? I can't get a job. So maybe you should go back to school was the answer for me. And a friend called me and mentioned the Patricia Roberts Harris Fellowship in Public Policy and Administration. And literally, I graduated in May after trying to find jobs all that semester. Couldn't find a job and started the program in June. Everything paid again. Finished that degree. Before I graduated, my program director, Dr. Katina Monin-Young, hooked me up with a job with the Internal Revenue Service before I even walked across the stage. So again, that's the beauty of an HBCU and what it can provide you as a student that maybe other schools can't. I always tell students and I tell my children, if I'm a corporation and I'm looking for the top African American students or the top students of color, where am I going to go to find them? If I'm going to Mississippi State or Ole Miss, I'm looking for them. And not saying that they're not black students that are in the top of their class and at the top of their profession there, but the first place I'm coming is an HBCU, so keep that in mind. Also keep in mind, you wouldn't be where you are today if not for your parents, guardians, grandparents, the ancestors. And you're here because of the prices that they paid to allow you to sit in the seat. While at Jackson State, Mississippi Valley was under attack. And every so many years, there's an attack on HBCUs in the state. It kind of goes, it's cyclical, maybe 20 years or so, every 15, 20 years. So the institutions of higher learning talked about, taking over Valley and making it a part of the Mississippi system. I don't even remember which specific school it would fall under. To tell you how tight we were as a SWAC and HBCU or Mississippi historically black colleges and universities, how tight we were protesting in Jackson at the Capitol on behalf of Valley. But because we knew it might be Valley today, it might be Alcorn the next day, then the next day it would be Jackson State, which we had that issue not too many years ago. So that just to give you an idea of how important it is with you at an HBCU, what you owe the ancestors, what you owe yourself, and what you owe to future generations to make sure that Valley is strong, to make sure that all HBCUs are strong. Because to be honest with you all of our institutions are under attack currently. And so if we don't care and do something about it and take a stand, where will we be? Where will your children or your children's children be if we don't do that? And I just had to, look, I totally steered away from my notes to share that with you all. So I've done my backstory. Let me go to comments that I wanted to share with you about philanthropy. Well, no, let me go back to the mentors that helped me get to where I am today. Had it not been for the Dr. Maria Luisa Alvarez Harveys of HBCUs, this is getting into a little bit of women's history for you and a little black history, tied all in. I mentioned Dr. Katina Monin-Young. Those two and Dr. Jackie Franklin, those three, two of whom are deceased. Dr. Harvey was the honors division director for years at Jackson State. There are thousands of us all across the country who were doing great things because she stayed, little short Mexican lady, she stayed on us 24/7. If we got out of line, she was going to either call you or threaten to call your parents to keep you on the straight and narrow. I don't know where any of us would be who came through that program without Dr. Harvey. Katina Monin-Young, a giant in public policy and administration. If you look at any state agency, you can pick out students that came through her program who are now directing programs for the state of Mississippi or directing foundations or other institutions that come from the field of public policy. If you take a look at Dr. Jackie Franklin, same thing. Anyone who is doing anything in city government in the city of Jackson or at the state level came under her tutelage. Then I fast forward to my professional life at Children's Defense Fund, Olita Fitzgerald. Al has worked with her for years. Marion Wright Edelman, who literally is Olita's mentor, and then prior to Marion Wright Edelman's mentor was Dorothy Height. How many of you all know Dorothy Height? Dorothy I. Height. If you don't, you need to know. Please look these names up. I don't have time to get into the history, but Dorothy I. Height is the black female standing to the right of Dr. King when he did his speech on the Mall in DC. And she was there with him every step of the way. Dr. Height's mentor was Mary McLeod Bethune. How many of you all know of Mary McLeod Bethune? Bethune-Cookman, named for her. She took the few pennies that she had to get the university started that we know now as Bethune-Cookman. So these great women, I follow in their footsteps. Of course, my mother, my grandmothers, all of these strong women have made sure that I've had the support and prayers that I needed to catapult me to the position I'm currently in, and I'm very thankful for them. So I know you all have many people that have done the same for you that you can give honor to. These folks saw in me, and I'm sure the people that are supporting you see in you what you might not even see in yourself. So they see it, they see that, whatever it is, that little spark, and then they help you, they shine you up, they throw the wood on the spark so that you can become the person that God intended you to become. So, and I'll take questions after. I'm going to jump now into philanthropy just to explain to you what philanthropy, because when Dr. Gordon said it, I really didn't know philanthropy. I knew that's giving stuff away. I had no idea that you could have a career in philanthropy. Working to give somebody else's money away is basically what it is. And the word is a Greek word, and it means the love of mankind, of humankind, to give. So you can give in many ways. And there's a difference between charity and philanthropy in a sense. Charity is, I'm going to help feed the homeless. I'll go and work at a soup kitchen. I'll give away clothes to Goodwill or things like that. Philanthropy is when you have money and resources and you give it not really for your benefit, but to benefit another and to benefit them on a system scale. You're trying to change and tackle a problem using philanthropic dollars. And that's basically what we do at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. So the difference in charity, other differences. Charity is short-term. Philanthropy is long-term. Charity is social services. Philanthropy is social change. Charity is reactive. Philanthropy is proactive. Charity is an individual response. Philanthropy is a collective response. Charity is developing independent communities. Philanthropy is empowering communities. So therein lies the difference. So Bishop Desmond Tutu has this quote that I like to use a lot because it kind of sums up how you too can be a philanthropist. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's all those little bits of good put together that overwhelm and change the world. So wherever you are, anybody can be a philanthropist. If you have $2 and you put money towards something that's going to have a systemic change, then you're a philanthropist. So I'm fortunate to work for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. How many of you all know the story of Kellogg cornflakes and cereal and all that? You know how I got started? I see a few. Good. When I started my work at Children's Defense Fund and I was funded by the Kellogg Foundation, I wouldn't allow my children to buy. We didn't buy any other cereal. Your choice, whatever was on the Kellogg shelf, that's what we bought for cereal. And I'll tell you the reason why. In Little Battle Creek, Michigan, Mr. W.K. Kellogg was working and discovered, and he discovered this like in his 50s. He discovered the cereal by accident. They were experimenting and trying to figure out, you know, what product can we sell. He was really into health and came up with the cereal. He went to sleep and came back the next day in a vat that he had put corn in, and it was Kellogg's Corn Flakes. He took all of the funds and put it in and started the foundation about 100 years ago. And we have been, the foundation gets its money from the trust, and that money comes from the Kellogg Company. 3 distinct entities, but it all leads to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And we give out our budget on any given year averages between $7 and $9 billion.
Say it again, please.
7 and 9 billion. We get to invest a small portion of that in the state of Mississippi and in Louisiana. That amount ranges anywhere between 25 and 35 million per year in grants. Our work across the world, across the globe, includes Mexico and Haiti. And nationally, we do work in Michigan, New Mexico, Mississippi, and New Orleans. And my purview is Mississippi, the state of Mississippi and New Orleans. In Mississippi, we focus our efforts on Sunflower County, the city of Jackson, and East Biloxi. So just to give you an idea of the level of work. What we focus on now is, I say in Mississippi and in New Orleans work, equity. Racial equity, community engagement, leadership, and then health, education, and employment equity. So anything that you see us working on, the main focus, the thread that runs throughout all of our work is what we call our DNA, and that's racial equity. Making sure that communities and families and children are thriving. Our focus is thriving children, and we know that children can't thrive unless they live in households with families who are working and can make a livable wage to take care of their children. But they also have to be in communities that are equitable and supportive and engaging in order for that to happen. That's the work that we do on a daily basis. And I'll pause there for a minute to go back to my backstory. Young people, make sure that whatever profession you choose, it is a profession that you love to do, that you're passionate about, that you would do even if you weren't getting paid for it in most cases. Not all of us have that luxury, but if you love what you do, then it will love you. And you won't have to worry about the dollars. You won't have to worry about how much you make. Of course, you have to think about that because you got to take care of yourself and your family. But you really need to concentrate on doing something that you love to do so it doesn't even feel like work. And I promise you, you'll go far in whatever profession you choose. And you may not know what that is today. It may take some exposure to different things to figure that out. I'm fortunate enough that when I made the decision to get my master's, it was something I was interested in. I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. Then got another job and worked on the PhD after I was married and older with children. But I was working with school district superintendents and education folks, and so I said, okay, I need another degree so that I can make sure that I'm up on everything that they're talking about and all the things that they need and see on a daily basis. And literally, those 3 degrees were the perfect degrees to lead me to philanthropy and work with the Kellogg Foundation. And I didn't even know. So keep that in mind. So I also wanted to share a little more detail with you all about our racial healing work. So we have focused, in 2007, the foundation made a major effort. The board decided that we would be an anti-racist organization. And what that means is doing whatever we can to make sure that we are aware of the needs of people of color. Because in most cases, we are the most vulnerable, and especially our children, and doing everything we can to make the playing field equal. So even in looking at grants, that's something that we have to account for. We look at, if your board is made up of, if it doesn't have any people of color on it, we take that into consideration. How does your staffing look? So we try and set the bar for other people, other organizations like ours, to meet. We look at our vendors and contractors. We can take all that into consideration. We are one of the most diverse foundations in existence because we make sure, and I have to share this, our president and CEO is June Montgomery Tabron. She didn't live in Mount Bayou, Mississippi, but her family hails from Mount Bayou, Mississippi. Now, please tell me y'all, you're from Mount Bayou? Oh, wonderful. So, I know y'all know the story of Mount Bayou. Does everybody know about Mount Bayou and how important it is to, okay. Mount Bayou is like the first incorporated all-black town. They had banks, hospitals. Who said that? You know, everything. It was the Black Mecca. If you watch Teal, you would know that when Miss Mamie came down, she had to actually stay in Mount Bayou and was protected because it was a town of black folks. Who knows who I.T. Montgomery is? I see a few hands. I.T. Montgomery is the ancestor of our president and CEO, June Montgomery Tabron. So I had the privilege of bringing her to Mount Bayou years and years ago before she got the position to go to visit the cemetery, to go visit the elementary school there that's named for I.T. Montgomery.
I.T. Montgomery.
That's right. Did you go there?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna have to tell her that thing. She'll be pleased to know. But I say that to let you know how important history is. Look at, connecting all those dots. And now she's funding major work in the state of Mississippi. And that's important to her. It's important to me as a Mississippian. But if you please go read up on I.T. Montgomery. He was the founder of Mount Bayou, Mississippi. The founder of Mount Bayou, Mississippi. Al, how am I on time? Because I'm losing track. I'm good. Okay. So that's a side note. So at any rate, because of the work the foundation does, we have pushed others to move toward being a more equitable society. Because we know if we don't have an equitable society, we can't have communities, families, and children that are thriving. That's really the foundational piece that we have to have in place. So we have created and adopted what we call the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation work. We literally have toolkits. You can go online and pull these toolkits down. We realize that for just pointing out or calling out racism and not doing anything about it or not having a guide for folks to work toward or have anything to get to the resolution or solving it, you've got to go through some healing and you've got to be prepared to help people transform. And so one of the basic things we do is have people talk to each other in small groups to talk about similarities and commonalities versus differences. We have what we call healing practitioners that we've trained over the years all across the country who do nothing but this to make sure that we help meet people where they are and bring them to a better understanding of what truth, racial healing, and transformation is all about. I'm not sure how many of you all watch MSNBC, but this past January we had what we call the Day of Racial Healing. We have it every year. And the Day of Racial Healing is where we request grantees and other people from all across the country, across the world, to come together to have these kinds of conversations. And Joy Reid, we were fortunate enough that NBC Universal partnered with us in New Orleans, and we were able to do a town hall meeting on racial equity. And that was really the first time that we had seen that level of conversation about racial equity on a network like that. So we were very proud. It was a very successful event. And for Mass Comms majors, you'll appreciate this. Our president and CEO probably did 50 interviews worldwide, starting at 5 a.m. I had to do maybe 10 of those. And it's something that in this position you have to get used to doing because you do it a lot. But we have a comms team at the foundation. They're responsible for any documents that we pass out, any speech that's given. I had to send my talking points to our communications people today to make sure that I covered what we needed to have covered. Any pictures, videos, podcasts, you name it. We have a department that handles that. So there are positions at foundations for mass comm pages. I'm going to close out with a few examples of some of the work that we're doing here in the state. How many of you all are familiar with the two Mississippi museums? If you haven't been to Jackson to see it, you need to see it. Those two museums are one of the first things that I signed off on to fund when I've been in this position 7 years now. And it was very controversial. I don't know, you all were probably too young to remember it. But we had one group that said, we just need a civil rights museum. You remember they talked about putting it at 2 groups. Then they talked about putting it somewhere here in the Delta. Everybody wanted to get the museum. So finally, they landed and said they were going to do it in Jackson. And the only way it was funded is because it would do, one side would be the Mississippi History Museum, the other side would be the Civil Rights Museum. And we had Governor Winter at the time, who was alive at the time. We had Mrs. Merle Evers was very involved, and several of the top legislators were involved in making that happen. Judge Reuben Anderson, don't let me leave somebody out. Speaker Gunn, several of the House and Senate members, but we also had several people from the federal level involved in making that happen. This is the only civil rights museum in the nation funded by a state government. And it was because, people were dug in on both sides, but they compromised and they worked together. And I never will forget having one of those aha moments, or the moment is special, when I'm on the phone with our president and CEO, on the phone with Governor Winter, on the phone with Ms. Merle Evers, and another one of our program officers having a conversation about the two Mississippi museums, the pros and cons. Many of the civil rights icons thought that it should only be a civil rights museum. And when they got there and actually saw it, they were very appreciative that we had both sides. Because really when you look at the history side, it explains why the civil rights side was necessary. So if you ever go, don't just do the civil rights side. You got to do both sides to get the full picture. So that's one project that we're very, very proud of, directly related to racial equity. And just think, with all the conversations around CRT and not having certain things about Black history taught in schools, we now have these two wonderful museums and other museums across the country that you have access to. Because literally, you all, it's up to you to learn our history. Yes. It's up to you. It's up to parents. It's up to churches, wherever you can get it. You can't necessarily just only depend on school to get information about who we are and what our contributions are. So keep that in mind. Another project that we have worked on and funded, or should I say our grantees have worked on and funded, because we're not allowed to lobby. We can fund organizations to do what they do and carry out their mission. You all remember the Mississippi flag transition. Everybody said it would never happen. And it happened because grantees and people in the community did the work, put in the work necessary to change that flag. And I'm so happy that we played a small role in that, supporting our grantees. I'll share one more with you, and well, two more, because one is pertinent to you as a student. We fund the institutions of higher learning to do what we call complete to compete. You do. All the colleges and universities have access to that program. If you have started school at the collegiate level and you have not finished, you apply for these funds and they will cover If you lack 6 hours, you may lack a whole semester or a year. Once you apply and they get all that information, they process it, you could very well get all that covered. So if you know people who have started school, who have not completed school, please encourage them to sign up or complete to compete.
So that money comes from the Hello Foundation?
Yes,
Or,
some of it.
oh,
So we we initiated, they submitted a proposal to do it. And I think there's some state dollars matching and maybe some other foundations, but we helped start that. And if you look on the website, you'll see WKK up at the bottom. But that is a very important program. We also have another program that helps with community college work. So you should look up that as well. It's Better Together. So anybody remember the controversy around the state taking over the Jackson Public School District? That was huge. So we were literally sitting in Battle Creek while the conversation was going on over at the State Department of Education about the takeover, feeling helpless, not thinking, what can we do? What role can we play? One of our program officers, Yamika Russia, had conversations with several of the people on the governor's staff, and they were looking for a third way out. We knew that they couldn't they couldn't fix what was going on with JPS alone. They needed help. So we got the mayor, then Governor Phil Bryant, and our president and CEO to sign a memorandum of understanding to create the Better Together Commission. We held community meetings for months. Appointed an advisory committee that would help the district select a superintendent and provide funding to support that superintendent once he was selected by the board. And now JPS has moved from a D to a B. So we're really excited about that. We're continuing to build momentum. We're continuing to support that effort and then drawing other foundations and other individuals to help. Jackson water crisis. Again, can you have equity in education, health, or employment if you don't have water, right? I never thought we'd be in the water business. I didn't know anything about water other than in the country, I came out the well because you turn the faucet, the water comes out. That's about as much as now I know too much about water just because we have to. We pulled a group of foundations and folks together to try to help support the city of Jackson in this effort, and so things are turning around. And we won't go into detail about the bills and all this other stuff because that's a bit of a nightmare, but we're going to continue to support and push forward to try and help Jackson with the water crisis so that we don't have another time where we have folks without water for months at a time or under boil water notices. So I will close out and allow you all to ask questions, and we have conversation and dialogue. Around racial equity, I always use this James Baldwin quote that I think just really sums everything up in terms of the work that we have to do, not only in this state but across the nation. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So until we face the fact that we have a racial equity problem, a racism problem, you can't do anything about it. So one of the things, if we know about it and others don't, it's our job to help meet them where they are and explain it, expose them to what needs to be done, and then work together to resolve those issues. So I will stop there and open it up for questions, and we'll proceed. And I did share via email the PowerPoint presentation, so you all can get that at another time. I'll send it to Mr. White.
yeah, we'll share it. Okay, you all, our time is short, so we're going to take some questions, and if you don't have questions, I have plenty. I see a hand waving at me. You all please welcome our Provost and Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Kathy Golden, and she has the first question.
Hi, Dr. William Bishop.
Yes, ma'am.
We know each other from.
I think we do.
So you mentioned all those great women, so I dated myself, Christina, Jackie, Rhea, and all those people I work with. But I'd like you to explain to the students how there's a connection, and Olita, between your work with the Children's Defense Fund and what you do now.
Oh, that's the reason I'm doing what I do now. So that's a long story. I'll try and condense it. So could you all, everybody hear her question? So when I started, let me back up. At Internal Revenue Service, that was my first job. And I did the touchy-feely things, like set up the vital site at the Jackson Medical Mall and organize and coordinate 200 people standing in line before I got there with their names on a list to help do their taxes. So I did that kind of work with Internal Revenue Service. Then they told me that I had to move to Memphis. My job was moving to Memphis, and I said, I'm not going to do that. So I decided to stay. Stayed a few more years and had me doing work in collections.
We got some Memphis people here.
Oh, that's okay. It was nothing against Memphis, but my oldest son lives in Memphis. I love Memphis.
That was a good
But yeah, well, not only that, my husband had just gotten a promotion on his job. We had just bought land to build a house. So there were things in play as to why we didn't move to Memphis. So fast forward, I was in collection pregnant, calling people in bankruptcy, having to tell them that they owed the IRS hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I was going home every day crying. That was not going to be a healthy situation for me to stay in. So I decided to make a switch and get into nonprofit management. And listen closely, because this is an important part of the story. I was at the GS-12 level by 27 at IRS. I was on the fast track. So I had to make a conscious decision to take a pay cut, to go backwards in order to step forward. So keep that in mind. For 3 years, I worked in the nonprofit sector for a person who was really tough to stay there, but I stayed there. Learned everything that she did in terms of writing grants, got all that information. And so what seemed to have been a bad situation ended up being a good situation. 3 years I stayed there. Now, not 1 year, because I know how some of y'all do, because I got some at home. They'll stay there 6 months and say, this ain't working out. I don't.
You know what, stay there for a moment.
You don't?
Talk about struggle. Sometimes
Struggle is real.
Yeah.
What did Frederick Douglass say? I don't have $1. Somebody got $1, I'll give it to you. What did Frederick Douglass say? Where there is no struggle, there is no progress. Y'all better write that down. Okay, so let me get to CDF. So I stayed there 3 years. Fortunate enough, and I didn't even know Olita at the time. We were from this one county over. She came to me and offered me a job. She said, I need somebody to do children's health insurance program work, and I don't have anybody. And I was like, sign me up quickly. So,
Did you know how to do that?
did I know how to do
The children's
health? Not really.
Okay, talk about
But just
that.
because, so yeah, and sometimes you have to, because I had written the grants and I had done work in that position with early childhood education, and I had to deal with prenatal health and healthy babies. So that gave me a little bit of edge into child health. So, and I had a policy background. And I was one of the first lobbyists at the state house, at the state capitol, doing work around children's issues. So that's how she got to know from that work. So then she hired me, and I didn't get back to where I was yet. But by the time I left, I stayed with Children's Defense Fund for 15 years. For 15 years. Loved it, wouldn't have gone anywhere. I was funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and by the Kellogg Foundation in that work at Children's Defense Fund. The work at Children's Defense Fund put me on a completely different level beyond the state of Mississippi, because I was the Southern Regional Deputy Director under Olita. So she taught me probably half of what I now know. Marion Wright Edelman taught me half of what I now know. And little did I know, when I went to interview, they flew me to DC for an interview with the CDF HR person and with Mrs. Edelman. And we started talking. I had no idea that she was the same lady that had come to the state of Mississippi, the first black female to pass the Mississippi bar, and had spent time at my grandparents' store in my little community I told you about earlier in Carthage. And she worked with my Aunt Winston Hudson and Dovey Hudson to integrate the county school system. She was their attorney. I didn't know that. I found that out in an interview in DC. We had the Ebony magazine where she was standing in the store with my grandparents. That was before I was born, so I had no clue. But when I went back and read it, I figured all that out. So anyway, that's the story of how I ended up going through CDF and ended up at the Kellogg Foundation. So they sought me and asked me if I would come and run the Center for Education and Innovation. I did that for 6 years and then got hired at the foundation about 7 years ago.
So I know it's 2 o'clock and some of you all have to go. If you have to go, and we'll continue for a few more minutes. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Mike.
Okay, my name is Michael Hogan. I'm a senior mass communication major in public relations concentration. I think I've recently discovered that I want to do some type of social media management. So I'm just wondering if it's common to there be spaces for social media.
If you all gonna go, you need to go. No conversation, please. And please make sure you leave your evaluation at the back. Okay, I'm sorry, Mike.
So I'm wondering if it's common for there to be spaces in communications departments for that, because I kind of do it now just to get my foot in the door, but I also want to know what are the responsibilities beyond logging on to a Facebook page, typing something.
Yes, no, that makes sense. So for those who couldn't hear, he wanted, as a mass comm major, doing work in social media, how can that be applied more broadly? There are positions right now with some nonprofits. They realize now paper flyer and mailing things to people through snail mail gets them nowhere. And so they are actually looking for young people to do their social media presence across all platforms, because really that's the only way we, philanthropy and nonprofits, can have an inroad to people your age. Most people don't even get we used to do things in the newspaper. Nobody really gets a newspaper anymore. A handful of people do. Everybody's on their phone or on their laptop or computer going through social media. And I think there is a huge market out there for that. We have 2 people in the foundation who do nothing but monitor what's being said about us on social media, but also planning stories and sharing information about all the work that we do through social media. So that is definitely a lucrative career in the state and outside the state. A lot of our nonprofits and foundations may be just catching on to that and seeing that as a need, but across the nation is huge. This gentleman here was next.
I had 2 questions. My name is Denison Dale, and I'm a graduate senior, major in mass comm with a concentration in broadcasting. And I want to know what some other obstacles that you had to face to get in the position that you're in right now. And the second question is, I know you help with the water crisis, the school and everything like that. Are you and your team are helping with a bill that has been talked about in the last week today about the HB 20 bill?
Yeah.
I want to know, are y'all helping with this?
Let me answer the last question.
Did you all hear the question?
No. He said, are we helping with any conversations around a bill that's being discussed at the Capitol right now? We can't lobby and we can't do any type of direct lobby. We can't talk about specific bills. I will say we support our grantees in making sure that the community is engaged in those conversations so that they can do what they need to do right by children and making sure the children are thriving. If you understand what I'm saying. Okay, your first question, he said, what other barriers have I faced? Obstacles, barriers and obstacles. And you know what's sad is because I try not to focus, because there's so many. You've heard people talk about death by 1,000 cuts. And so I put up sort of an armor to not even think about that and keep my eyes on the prize, and whatever the goal is, whatever is being said or done back here, whether it's, as you all say, haters, is that still the term? If that's the case, everybody has some. If you don't have some, you're not really doing anything. But I'll say, I focus on finding a way to go over, under, through, or around whatever obstacle. And I tell my staff, my team all the time, we're gonna get it done as long as it's ethical and legal. So whatever it takes to get the job done, whether it be me personally, our team, whomever, you just gotta get it done. You can't focus on those barriers and obstacles. But I will share, there's a negative stigma always with, being a graduate of an HBCU. The best way you can fight that off are barriers. People hope you're a black male, you're a black female, or instead of being assertive, you're considered aggressive, all the things. But just be you and do what you know to do and be confident in that, and you won't have a problem. I mean, you will be so focused that you won't let that bother you. And if God has it for you, it's for you. And as long as you know that and know that in your heart, I'm not saying you're not gonna have some tough days. I have tough days, but you can't let that get you down. You gotta wake up, get up, show up, dress up, and do what you have to do. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Mine was kind of tied in with him, but first, I was gonna say appreciate for what y'all doing for Jackson. I'm from Jackson. We go to the wall with the water and stuff.
Okay.
But anyway, it kind of tied into what he was saying. But like you said, you had to change your majors like 4 different 5 times. So I'm sure you was probably dealing with that in college for a minute. So like, how did you deal with that? Like how you almost there at the finish line, and then something happens where you have to shift and you have to be there even longer. Like what kind of courage did you, or like what kind of mental state was you in doing those different changes?
That's a good question. If y'all couldn't hear him, he said when I made the pivot and I changed majors all those times, what was my mental state? If it took me longer in school and how I handled that. Most of those major changes took place my freshman and sophomore year, luckily. Because if you are talking about changing majors your junior and senior year, you're gonna be here for a while. And you can't, so I was in liberal arts already. So that it was pretty easy to make that shift. There's no way for you to go from a urban studies major to a pre-med major and not have some real issues, or vice versa. So you have to think about all those things. Anything that the university had, we had Kwame Ture, we had Gwendolyn Brooks, we had all these people came to speak. So there was anything Jackson State had in Dansby Hall or anything that was extra for I was there. So you have to also make sure you take advantage of everything that the university provides so you can know about, be aware of other things. When I was in school, we didn't have the opportunity to do, travel abroad. Fortunately, my son got a chance to go to Brazil. That changed his whole outlook. He went for a summer session, 6 weeks in Brazil. When you take advantage of those kinds of things, it helps you hone in on what you want to do.
Excuse
and
me.
It makes it easy.
And we do have international programs.
Please
we
take
do have
advantage.
students who will travel somewhere.
Please take advantage, because it opens your mind and you see things that you've never seen or experienced before, and then that changes the way you think about what it is you want to do in the future.
First of all, I want to let you know too that I've had an opportunity to meet you as well. I actually was covering the event when they named you director and they had the reception downtown. So my question is, and it kind of dates me here, the Kellogg Foundation, during the time that I was working in Jackson State, funded a journalism lab that led to them being accredited, getting their ACE, JMC accreditation. So my question is, and it's a little bit selfish, are you all still doing those type of funding right now?
Now, that's a good question, and that predates me, but I know about the work that you're talking about. There once was a time at the foundation where all the focus was on academics in terms of university and colleges, supporting programs like that program. Over the years, probably about 10 years ago, there was a distinct shift after Hurricane Katrina, and the focus became laser focused on young children, ages 0 to 8. And so all of our emphasis is on early childhood education systems. We do fund some work at the university level. We have a few grants that deal with maternal child health at JSU. And most of the programs that are funded at the university level, it has to be a statewide effort. Unless it's in Sunflower County, the city of Jackson, or East Biloxi.
One more question. I'm glad you mentioned the two museums. I've had an opportunity to go to the civil rights side. At one point, the Kellogg Foundation was helping the museum give free admission to the museum. Is that still going on in case someone wants to go?
Yes, that's still going on, particularly for elementary and middle school children. So any school district can put in a request. We've given a grant to the museum. Any school district that puts in a request to bring students there can do so. And there are even additional funds. For instance, coming from here, you really would have to do it overnight. Or children coming from the Gulf Coast. There are funds available through the museum. And for adults, there are certain days. The day after Dr. King Day, for the past, I think, 5 years, we started it the first 2 years, free admission. FedEx picked up on it, and they do that every year. So you'll hear different organizations will announce that they are covering the cost to enter the museum. And you can actually call the museum, and they'll let you know what those days are. But there are I think every Sunday is free. Yes.
You had mentioned that on Kellogg, y'all I forgot what it's called, about they pay for you to go to college?
Yes.
What's the name?
Complete to compete.
Yeah, so we can fill out for that, or is it applies to like certain?
It applies to people who have maybe dropped out.
Oh,
I need to clarify that. If you're already in school, it doesn't apply. But people who have dropped out and say maybe in a profession doing whatever and want to come back to school and finish, they can apply and come back. Okay. And they'll cover the cost.
Do y'all have scholarship opportunities out there?
We do not a specific scholarship, but now we fund other nonprofit organizations that provide scholarships and fellowships.
And you all don't drop out so you can come back.
Please don't.
Please stay.
We don't want you to do that. We're trying to keep people in the state, and we're trying to secure them. So you're on a track. When you graduate, we hope you stay in the state, but we're trying to get folks who may not be up to their full potential, doing whatever kind of job that doesn't pay as much as they could be getting for what they're doing. We want to get them back in the system so that they can up their salaries and be able to better take care of themselves and their children. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was just going to give an example of how some of your grants can work. So Kellogg helped fund the breastfeeding project at Jackson State. So Valley, I had a small grant from Jackson State to do some of those activities here on the campus. So the people in social work can turn it over to them. So they were able to do some of the breastfeeding workshops, both here on the campus, but also to reach Sunflower County. So it was a Jackson State grant, but it was the Delta benefited in the sense that we partnered with them as a sub-grantee to make that happen.
And that happens a lot. I want to just elaborate on her statement that we don't do any direct service. And that's the part that I miss because I was in it for so long. I love the direct service, being able to go and set these things up and make them happen. We just cut the checks. The grantees on the ground, the communities that have programs in place that come to us seeking funding, those are the people who make it work on the ground. And they can do subcontracts, there are all kinds of different things that they can do to spread that money even further. Some people set up a matching program. Like we'll give some money to an organization and they may have a matching program that doubles or triples the money. And like I said, we don't do the work. We cut the check, community does the work. And much of our focus is on, if it's not community-led and community-driven, it doesn't have racial equity worked into it, more than likely we're not going to fund it. So just so that you all have that understanding of the way in which we work.
One more, I'm sorry, about that, do y'all go about with the housing or real estate?
We don't do housing.
Oh.
Kresge Foundation, capital improvements. Kresge Foundation would be the one to go to for any type of capital improvement, buildings, things like that. Now, we do have a lot of grantees who have access to our funds, and one of their projects, they may have a housing component. We fund things surrounding it, like, training people for employment, to be a carpenter or do whatever toward housing, but we don't pay for the actual physical piece of it. We have to rely on other foundations to come in and take care of those pieces of work.
Okay, one more question?
Okay. How y'all doing? My name is, I go by Keith. So, really I got in here late, so hopefully my question is appropriate, but I just wanted to know. So I got written down with the water issues in Jackson and your new knowledge in water. Do you recognize the connection in racial injustice playing a role in the problem?
Oh, certainly. That's a great question. And that is the reason we're involved, because we know that it's directly tied to inequity, systemic issues, all tied to racism. And so Jackson, we're focused on Jackson, but this is happening all across the country. If you look at what happened in Flint, and because that was in Michigan, we got involved in Flint because it was a Michigan city. And my colleague that directs the Michigan work played a major role in what happened with trying to correct the issues in Flint. There are many other towns and cities across this country who are experiencing the same thing mainly because of lack of resources and starving cities and towns because they're a majority black people of color. So that's the main reason that we're involved, because we know that exists. Systemic racism exists in every aspect, whether it's the government, corporations, you name it. We know that a lot of the root causes are due to racism and lack of resources, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Doctor. As we close, I want to do two things.
Thank you so much for tuning into our broadcast. If you would like to catch up with many more stories that we have, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once again, this is MVSU News on WVSD TV.